At this time, should we mute ourselves or should we keep it open?
Excellent question. I would say if you are not speaking, then mute yourself, and I will do so right now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the book launch of Sell You a Theory, a study of life by Harki Dhillon, MD. I'm Christina Guillen, Programs Coordinator for Inlandia Institute, which is the nonprofit literary organization bringing this event to you today. And as I understand it, today's presenter is a longtime participant and supporter of Inlandia, since Inlandia's very first writing workshop, in fact, which he claims helped to support his writing and publishing to this day. Everyone at Inlandia is very proud of Harki. He's such a great example of why Inlandia is here and what can happen if you stick with it. He believes in Inlandia, what Inlandia is doing, and is eternally grateful for their support of writers and artists for the Inland Empire. So before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. If anybody has questions and they'd like to start building questions throughout the program, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and also the raise your hand function. And so we won't be using the chat box today. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce Dinaz P. Coachbuilder, another great supporter of Inlandia. She's a poet and an artist. Her book of poetry is called Metal Horse and Shadows, and her painting can be found on the cover of the newly released anthology, San Bernardino Singing. She has a few words to share. Please welcome Dinaz P. Coachbuilder.
I think she might be muted. I think Dinaz is muted.
Can you hear me? I don't see myself.
Yes, we can hear you. Just, you can go ahead and speak, and I'm going to try to put you as the video.
Okay. I do see myself. This is the kind of weather when we are absolutely delighted to live in the Inland Empire. I am most pleased to be participating in Inlandia Institute's launch of Dr. Harki Dhillon's book, Sell You a Theory. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Harki Dhillon. I might be saying Harki because he's Harki to a lot of his friends, and his friends are legion in Riverside, California, the United States, the UK, and India. Harki is an MD, FRCS. He has a Master of Science in Orthopedic Surgery, and he specializes in hands. Harki is indeed a Renaissance person. Oh, you're going to say, oh, that's a cliche. Here she comes out with Renaissance again. But he truly is. He's a writer of different genres. He has written 2 books of poems. Christina, you're going to show us the photographs of the poems? He's written 2 books of poems. He's written a biography that's going to be published soon. There is, of course, this very unique book that we're going to talk about and learn more about. He's a surgeon, a philosopher, a family man and friend, a historian, a scientist, a biologist, a filmmaker, a researcher, a patient listener, a mortal being who seeks answers to the eternal questions of life, death, and the future thereafter. Ah, there we go. We see Harki's books, Invisible Hands and Misty Darkness. These are his 2 books of poems. Harki, I'm going to invite you to say a few words. And also, if you would read, no, I'm going to start off actually. Yes, Harki, if you would say a few words and also read from your book.
Hello?
Harki is going to say a few words to us in just a minute. Aha.
Hello, Dinaz, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I have decided that I will continue to write books because then I tend to get to hear great things about myself, probably the only time. But that's so sweet of you. To begin with, it's really my grateful thanks to Katie and Christina for the Inlandia Institute. Like Christina said, being in close association with the Inlandia Institute for over 12 years now, and it has grown every year. And especially Katie, congratulations to you for all the hard work, and Christina, how you help us struggling writers is quite amazing. So thank you very much. This is my 3rd book, and I think we shall explore it and hear much more as we go along. I really do appreciate this opportunity. I have 2 friends and reviewers as panelists also, along with Dinaz, and Rajiv Anand, MD, is a friend of mine since medical school days, a great friend, a great thinker, philosopher, and generally a good chap all around. He's a retinal surgeon, so he'll be here. And then a friend of mine, Aman Maan, who is a PhD in bioengineering and a nanoscientist. So he has a deep understanding of the cell and structure, etc., and how they work with him. So he shall be with us. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And Dinaz, back to you. Oh, I'll actually, let me, she wanted me to read. So this is the book cover, which we'll talk about. I just wanted to go back and just read a couple of pages about the introduction, and we'll talk about this particular cover a little later. So this is from the book. I have studied the human form for 40 years in all its wondrous dimensions, from cell structure and function, conception and embryology, to the development of this beautifully designed human being that functions like a well-oiled machine, except that this machine has life. It has movement, thoughts and feelings, and a definite lifespan. Things can and do go wrong due to disease and trauma, quite often resulting in early death. Each body encases within it an indomitable spirit and a will to accomplish dramatic and awe-inspiring feats. I have been involved at a personal and clinical level in the process of birth and death, of illness and recovery, and as a surgeon, having performed thousands of surgeries, looking at who and what we are from the inside. I have listened to hearts with a normal reassuring beat and rhythm, and to the abnormal diastolic and systolic murmurs, felt the pulse with dropped and irregular beats, revealing a system in distress. So this is the human body, but again, we're going to go down to its basic unit of life, the cell, and reveal more of what the book has to offer and how it may affect us and how maybe we can predict how we will behave in the future. So thank you again, Dinaz. Your button, mute.
Dinaz, I think you're muted.
Cellular Theory is a uniquely original work. This is not a book of poems. The poetry and the world of imagination is at the heart of it. Cell is the story of the interaction of life with its surroundings, from its origins a millennia ago through our present day and extending towards the distant future with all its possibilities. In doing so, Harki scours life's interconnections with science, history, geography, mathematics, religion, and philosophy, and their influence. Rajiv and then Aman, both of who have reviewed Harki's books, I'd love you to say a few words, starting off with Rajiv.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invite and for the introduction, Dinaz. I have known Harkirat now for close to 45 years. We go back to literally pre-medicine and then through the boot camp of medical school and everything else. So it really is, we go back many experiences together. So I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, and because of the time difference, occasionally we'll chat late at night because he is a nocturnal animal and I try and keep awake with him. So one thing I did not know before I read the book was that I was one of the respondents for the questions he poses in the first chapter. Who are you? What is the meaning of life? What constitutes a human? And so on. So that's an intriguing part that he's shared and for all of us to kind of look at and say, stop there for a minute to go further in the book. And as he mentioned initially, when I actually reviewed the manuscript and I saw the cover, it's just struck me right there. I said, that's an aerial shot of Venice. And the transposition there is Venice, okay, why is he choosing Venice as the cover? And even though they say you don't judge a book by the cover, it makes sense as you read further because he extrapolates that to a fish. And the Grand Canal looks like the gastrointestinal tract of a fish that is feeding by the side. So Harki, I may have stolen your thunder there, but I thought that was very funny at that point. The book is really a book of introspection. I mean, I would never have sat down and read that book and kind of struck me till I went back and read the manuscript and subsequently the published copy 2 or 3 times, and you have to let it sink into you to really grab what it's telling you. And it makes a lot of sense, and we have to step back outside ourselves to realize the points that he's making in the book. So it is broader than the short manuscript and short book that he has created. So the first few chapters with the cell talks about the basic biology of cell and it just as a juxtaposition of the ovum and the sperm coming together with a planet being hit, a meteorite hitting Earth as the origin of life is amazing. I mean, that is just a drawing that he's made, the simple line drawings. It makes sense to a reader. And that's really is like a parallel between start of life. So a cosmic view of what's going on at a cellular level. And then he ties it all together further down when he talks organizing the different organ systems within the body, how the GI tract works, how the arterial system, how things happen. And then later on in the book talks about a multicellular organization that happens later. So that was really, really fun. So if I may, I'm going to read a couple of sections. Harki, is that what you want me to do? Kind of talk first and read the section, or what would you prefer?
Just read the ones you've chosen, Rajiv. Thank you.
Okay. So the first one that Kenny struck me after the cellular organizing was on page 65. All life dies. It deteriorates to the end point of death. Yet it keeps going, restarting the clock with birth. An extremely important aspect of one's existence is the concept of time. Human beings have quantified long or short time and qualified good or bad time, measured in hours, minutes, seconds, nanoseconds, and years, but have not been able to give it a satisfactory definition. I think of time as a unit of deterioration. That struck me. A human is born and then dies at an average age of 80 years. Ants live from a few weeks to many years. Common garden birds live 2 to 5 years, and cells in the human body live from a few days to the lifetime of the human. But ultimately, all will die. Even the sun will die. Radioactivity is measured by its half-life, that is the time it takes for half the atoms of the radioactive material to disintegrate. It could be a few microseconds to billions of years. How much time will it take for anything to animate or inanimate to deteriorate? The only way to stop time is to create. Creation initiates the start of time, but deterioration begins in that instant. Further on in the book, I was struck by the parallels that he's drawn between the multicellular organisms and how we exist amongst our microcosm, amongst our community, amongst our planet, and also the broad outline that he's made of cells within the human system metastasizing as cancer cells to different areas of the body, and how we, as a human being, can maintain our communities and our planet. So that's a broader cosmic view that he's gotten at the very end. So I'm going to read 2 more short passages. The next one towards the latter part of the book. We exist. This fact can start us on a path of scientific and thoughtful exploration, like addressing the age-old question of why we exist, and it's difficult to say, how we came to be, and where are we going from here. And with that, I'll come to the last passage that I had chosen. We will ultimately do what the cell has done. What has happened in the past billions of years shows us a path to the future and evolution. If we are a metastatic deposit of malignant cells, we will be destroyed. Or we will kill our host, though we originate from the host, parent, or God. If we are the first ever form of life, we should study ourselves and our past for the billions of years we have existed. It will possibly reveal our future. Time and distance are our friends and our enemy. We live and yet we die. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rajiv. Aman?
Yes. Hi, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to be included in this panel. And I really want to thank the organizers. And I want to congratulate Dr. Dhillon for this really insightful and really interesting book, The Cellular Theory. So I want to give you a little bit of background about what I do and how this book really touches closely on what I do on a daily basis at work. So as Dr. Dhillon mentioned, I'm a nanobiologist. My training and expertise is actually in in making drugs more effective at targeting to the right parts in the body, and to find the right cells in the body and to actually enter those cells. And this book actually touches on this concept of the cells in the body and how they're so designed so that they're able to navigate through obstacles and able to reach their destination and be so effective at it, and how we as a human being can actually really learn from this and incorporate that in our daily lives as well. So I want to touch upon a passage that is really interesting, that and actually would give you a little bit of perspective about what I thought about it on this. So this is actually from the chapter it's called The Human Being. And this talks about that as a human, the human beings are considered here to represent life. And these human beings built little houses. And then they would collectively build another wall around the city to fortify itself. Now, these house walls, fort walls, always had doors and windows. The doors being used for exit and ingress of goods, materials, and fellow humans. This is similar to cell membranes, cell walls, which allow ingress and egress of nutrition and waste and other materials through their doors or receptors. Entry and exit in a human's house is allowed after a knock on the door or ringing or doorbell. The guest is identified and allowed, in which is what a cell probably does through its membranes or wall. It identifies friend and foe and allows entry. And this again brings back to what I do in terms of when we're designing drugs to target the right cells. In the past, what was done was when we inject drugs into the body, the drugs is thought of as a foreign particle and it's quickly ejected out, or the body mounts a response on it. But over the last decade or so, the whole field has moved towards how these drugs can then be manipulated to have the right coating or signals present on the drugs, so that they're able to then give the right signal, the right, and go and ring the right doorbell on the cells that need the drugs. So it's something very striking on how Dr. Dhillon was able to convey this really incredibly complex phenomena in such simplistic way. And for us to really see how he draws the parallel between how the cells are able to navigate through, and how we as scientists and physicians and are now starting to think about how the new drugs should be made and how they can be made smarter so that they act as the way the cells have always done and be more effective at it. So I thought this was really, really insightful. The other passage I really want to touch on is one that comes again at the end of the book. It's about how cities are designed and how we as humans navigate through cities, and how that is similar to cells navigating through the bodies. And so this is a passage that talks about, in the body, cells are transported great distances in the arterial and venous systems. Humans move great distances on the roads, our arterial system. These roads have the same design as does the vascular system in the body. The artery carries blood and cells away from the heart, and the veins lying next to the arteries carries blood and cells to the heart. The roads and highways carry traffic both ways, to and away from the heart of the city. And again, this is, it's really something that I want to show you based on, I want to give you an example of how this can be captured using an animation that was actually put together by a think tank. And I don't know if I can just quickly share my screen and share this animation with you. And then you can really grasp on what this topic really touches on. So I don't know, can you see this animation right here?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, So this is actually the movement of people in and out of Manhattan, right, in New York City. And you can see this is given as a time course on Monday throughout the week and different times of the day. And you can see how it basically, goes up and down. It's a pulsatile movement of humans going into the city of New York, in the heart of the city on a daily basis, right? And then when the weekend comes in, it kind of just relaxes down. So you can see as the weekend on Saturday, Sunday, the whole pulsatile motion drops down. But overall, you can see how it feels like it is like the pulse of the city. And you can see how this nice parallel that Dr. Dhillon drew about, that the humans being walking through the cities and navigating through their daily lives is so similar, so akin to how the cells in the heart and the heart pumping the cells all through the body, throughout the venous and the arterial system. So I thought this animation, which was made independently, this is an animation that I came across after I had read the book, and I sent this to Dr. Dhillon, that this was such a striking concept that was something that people are always thinking about and trying to connect the dots. But here is a book that really makes you start noticing things in your life, and then how you can start really digging deep and thinking how you could, what's the analogy and what's the consistency that you see between your human body as well as the way humans live. So I thought this was really neat. So this was what I wanted to share. I'll just maybe give it back to Junaz.
I'm going to ask Harki now a couple of questions. Harki, the main and the first one really is, what was the impetus that motivated you to think about this unique phenomenon called life? What started you off?
Thanks, Dinaz. But before I go there, really a big thank you to Rajiv and Aman. I just felt like they should probably carry on the program and talk about the book. I could just sit back and relax. The pulsatile population of New York, you're perfectly right. I mean, we have the pulsatile system in the body, and sometimes I kind of link that to also what the body is trying to tell us. If we use our own traffic system to have a continuous supply and an alternative for traffic to be flowing smoothly and not causing issues, or we've invented the traffic light system, which makes it a pulsatile system. Maybe the body is trying to tell us we want to go away from that, make better roads and cars which are taken like the bloodstream, and there'll be more effective usage of time and space and everything else. So thank you for that. Dinaz, sorry, I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you for this question. The impetus, there was always a motivation of, ever since I did medical school and kept going and looking at, how we studied the cell, embryology, development of human beings. But that was done as a part of a curriculum. That was done as a part of what we needed to know. And then when I became a surgeon and I started treating different kinds of conditions, and then actually going into the body, and for many years looking at how these organ systems were connected. So the thoughts were always there, developing slowly. I suppose my life was like a bit of a freight train rushing in, and not having time to sit back and analyze and study and write about this. But the thoughts, I think, were always there, developing and over time. And like I said, time is sometimes a friend and enemy, because sometimes it doesn't allow you to think like that or do things. Not fortunately not a full stop, but a comma came in my life with a heart attack. And that kind of stopped me in my tracks. Literally, that's why the freight train analogy is to say, you know what, this gives me time to put together in thoughts this very, very complex part of what life is and how it is interpreted, how it is lived, and how life will continue when we are gone. But like the cell which has stayed for billions of years, if our species has to stay, then we have to learn how to live with ourselves and on the planet. And of course, we're going to talk about the other aspects of it as we go along. But the impetus was one's close contact with one's own mortality. And you know, illnesses give you a time, and sometimes it's like a little tap on the shoulder saying, "Hey, slow down, think about where you're headed and what you're doing, and contribute in a little more positive fashion of to this cell structure, to the cell organism, to the human organism, and the superorganism, as we talk about later."
Thank you, Harki. Which reminds me, of course, that you went through something traumatic and it got you to be introspective. And it takes something like COVID-19 to get us to become introspective also. It gives us, it forces us sometimes, because we have more time on our hands to think about our lives and where we are going and our priorities. And I think that we appreciate some of the things that we took for granted. But I'm going to move on to my next question. Now, you surveyed people, I'm not sure how many, but their age range was from 18 through 65. And I thought those questions so interesting. And it got me to think about those questions myself. So what are the conclusions you drew from the results?
Thank you. Before I come to that, if I may, you brought up the COVID part. And as I mentioned, I think a lot of people do go through little commas like that, which makes them think about life. But somehow life now has given us a certain lesson in a pandemic where it has stopped the world. It hasn't stopped it. I think it's a comma or a semicolon, because this has given time for people for weeks as a human race to think about what's happening about pollution, how we can take care of ourselves, about health, about diversity, about race. So it has literally given us that moment in time to actually think about this, work together, and actually contribute in a positive way to the health of our whole organism. So thank you for bringing that up. This survey was kind of interesting because I suppose it's not it just being a small part of the scientist part that I had to have some corroboration or some validity to my thoughts to see if I was on the right track or not, and whether it was worth spending all this time thinking about it. So the sample lot was basically my unsuspecting friends who came over or whom I was talking to. And I had these list of questions. I didn't give them any warning. They were, you know, man, woman, 18-year-old, 65-year-old, professional, non-professional, different levels of education. And I just had these questions and I literally popped them with a piece of paper and a pen and say, please don't think, just write what you react to these questions, because I wanted them to respond immediately rather than because that makes it of who they are at that particular time. So I'll kind of read a little bit because again, there was no conclusion that I arrived at, because something so complex as this, I don't think can be concluded in any way. It can point us in a direction of thought which we want to go in. So these questions were things like define life. When did life start and how? When did human beings appear on earth? What is a human being? and something very basic like number of cells in the human body. So, and what is the most significant achievement of the human being? And the answers were very telling because they were completely different to what I was trying to formulate, which made good sense to me because I said if they're not thinking that way, maybe folks haven't started thinking in this particular way in a very collective fashion. I'm sure there are other people out there in the world who are kind of thinking similar thoughts, but the majority of people are not. So the summary of each question, for instance, define life, was somebody said life is a journey, and that was it. That was their definition of it. What a gift to be cherished and enjoyed with a need to procreate. Life is the ability to have children and to nurture them. Life has an end. Life is a biological and biochemical process in harmony. Life can breathe, taste, smell, and talk. It is being alive. So that's just part of it. And somehow it told me that folks hadn't really thought in detail about the most beautiful gift that we have is life, but we take it for granted doing other things. When did life start and how? The answers were no one knows when life started, which is true. There's a lot of conjecture there. But estimates from this group were 4.5 billion years, which is very near the truth. That was one person. And the others were 10 million years, 50 million years, 50,000 years. And the best, of course, was life starts at birth, which completely ends all argument right there. And many did not think about it at all. They said this doesn't feature in our mental makeup. And only one response was by God, which is kind of interesting because out of 7.5 billion people on Earth, 90%, it's just I think 8 to 9% who are atheists, but the rest believe in God. And yet this was a different answer. When did human beings appear on Earth? Most respondents had never thought about it, and other guesses were 10,000 years, 50,000 years, 1 million, and 5 million years ago. So again, the whole thought process of when human beings, it's so important that we should really know when we kind of appeared, but nobody had really any particular idea. Interestingly, my other thought process was, what is a human being? And I, of course, have certain thoughts which are in the book, but what people were saying was a human being is a person, not an animal, thing, or object. The most complex of mammals, over and above the animal kingdom, with a superior intelligence and a moral compass. So this was like one answer, which was more detailed, more thoughtful. I'm not saying the others weren't. It's just because I didn't give them time to think. I just wanted them to tell me what they really knew right off the bat. A human being has an ability to perceive feelings with a brain to analyze and make things happen. So just coming back to just one more, the number of cells in the human body. So, I mean, I had done research, I had studied the cell, but throughout my medical school, throughout my rotations in surgery, my practice, I had never really figured out how many cells we have. I saw the liver, the lungs, the brain. I've been into every part, but never really thought that these were cells. I thought of them as the organ systems which delivered a certain function. And all respondents of this survey knew that the body had cells, which was wonderful, but then there was a huge difference in the number of cells they thought made up the body. It varied from 10,000, 30 million, 80 million, 100 million, 1 billion, and 4 quadrillion. And I had to figure out what quadrillion was, because this person also didn't think so, but it sounded very impressive. And one was infinity, which was forever reproducing. So nobody had any idea of the number of cells that we are made of, all the cells that contribute to our life and existence. And, just that's to pique your curiosity, but I'll tell you that we are anything, again, it's still not worked out by all the scientists in the world, they give an estimate of 30 to 100 trillion cells. And nowadays, of course, we hear about trillions because of the economy, but way back, trillion was a really, really, really big number and still is. And along with the 35 trillion cells that make us function, we have another 35 trillion cells just in our gastrointestinal tract, which is extremely important for our life process. So again, this provided me the validity for my quest of identifying more about life and more about little particular details which could make us think of who we are, what we are. Long answer to that question, but I thought it was kind of really important for this survey, which really gave me also the impetus to continue with this line of thinking and writing about it.
I wonder what would happen.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, yes, thanks.
All right. I wonder what would happen if you went back to the people that you surveyed. Did the very fact that you sort of dropped these little seeds into their being change anything in their outlook? Have they started ruminating about these questions, and or did they just forget about it and move on? It would be really interesting. And I'm going to move you to the next question, though. And one aspect of the book is your theory of, you mentioned cancer. So talk about that with us.
Thanks. Yeah, just about what those people were thinking whom I included in the survey. I think they avoid me, right? They don't want to come and talk to me. No, I haven't followed up, but I think some of them have read the book and reviewed it also. So no, I'm sure it affected them in certain ways to maybe think about it a little bit. But you're right, I haven't followed up, which might be worth it. Now about cancer, the first thing really off the bat I would like to say is that don't think of cancer as a bad word, because it's just part of life and it exists and we have to deal with it. So having said that, to think of it just as a phenomenon, I saw the similarities, especially during surgery and seeing pathology specimens. When you see beautiful normal tissue, it really is beauty in itself. When you see normal tissue, Rajiv will, he's been in there. But when you see cancer, you can recognize it because it looks nasty. It has destroyed the architecture of that beautiful normal tissue, and which in one of my poems in Invisible Hands, have kind of said as nature's beauty gone wrong. Now, so when long ago I saw a satellite view of Los Angeles, and I'm not picking on Los Angeles, it's a beautiful city, but New York, Delhi, London, Tokyo, anything you take, and you see a satellite view, you see it literally as loss of architecture. The whole architecture of nature has been taken over by buildings and roads and asphalt and other things, and it looks malignant. Unfortunately, again, it's not to put people off, but that's what it does. And then if you look at how cancer spreads in its stage 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you look at how human beings congregated in 300, 400,000 years ago, one by one, family by family, they got together, they made villages and towns and cities, and then huge cities. So there was, from loose kind of tissues and organisms like the humans, they got together to form these large masses of humanity. And then when that was taken over they then started spreading. So if you see the map of the world, you'll see these big cities, and there are little cities, and as people went from one place to another, then it looked more like the spread. And if you hear, news forecasts and other places, people talk about metastasizing of terror, of ill will. And so these words are beginning to be used to describe human behavior, but the cells have been doing that for hundreds and thousands of years within ourselves. So on the planet at the moment, if you were to categorize of where we are, we would certainly say we're at stage 3, because we're all over the planet and we exist in every aspect of it. And we are, a lot of people would say, destroying it. People talk about climate change. I don't know about the climate, but it can destroy the cell-like structure, the planet, completely if we continue with the way we are using our resources and how we are destructuring everything that has no normal natural structure. The other concept about metastasis, which is spread, remote and distant spread. Now that's what happens. We are spreading because we have been to the moon. That's again going away from our comfort on this planet. Now we are beginning to go to the moon. We want to go to Mars. We have sent out little explorer vessels way deep into space. And that is where I feel, again, if you apply the formula, which I think exists, somehow I think cancer behaves like that, because cancer gets to be originated in an organ. And I'm sure there are little things and little parts of itself it sends over all over the body, which goes and identifies places which are fertile for being embedded. Just like the human beings, they'll go to find a place where there's good soil, where there's water, the air is good. So it has to have an idea where to go. Prostatic cancer will go to bone. There's no connection. Why does it go and register and sort itself out over there? So these are the things which are so similar that just studying ourselves, what we are doing, could give us answers on how to maybe beat cancer, to go back and say, well, this is how it goes. So we, excuse me. So anyway, that's part of why the book explores it a little more, but there are similarities which we shouldn't ignore.
Thank you, Harki. Which brings me back in a way to myself, being a survivor of cancer. They say out of the bad can come something good. And it certainly changed my priorities and told me what's important, and hopefully governs the way that I live now. But going back to your cover,
Dinaz,
both Rajiv.
for 1 second. We have a question that relates. It's from the Q&A section, and it relates to what Harki was discussing. I'm going to read it out loud. So this is from Karen Bradford. What do you think about cells containing a sort of ancestral memory, carried from generations past to be present in each of us today and contribute to who we are, what we think, how we react?
Yeah. No, that's actually, that's something which I thought we should bring up. And Karen, thank you so much for that question. Nice to have you here. Long time no see. So we're looking forward to meeting up sometime. Now about this ancestral memory, it's been talked about, but the way again I look at it, having looked at the formation of the multicellular organism, which means from single cells for 3.76 billion years, these cells have got together, and way I look at it is, if you're forming a city and human beings come together and say there are 12 or 14 families, then these guys will say, well, how do we get along? What's your skill? You're a carpenter, you're a nuclear engineer, you're a technician, you're a gourmet cook, and let's get together, have our specialties, and form a community where we can all work together with our specific skills. Now, for this question that you mentioned, I feel that when these cells were forming, again, mind-boggling, but over billions and billions and billions of years, these guys were sitting together at the cellular level and saying, what are your specialties? And in that process, with multicellularity coming on, there were some cells which were just on an aggressive stance. These guys were cells which had just these characteristics of being maybe just aggressive. And these guys may have said we are warriors, which is a, I'm just not painting warriors in a bad way, but we want to go out and be aggressive. Not that I'm just saying warriors are good people, but it's the maybe they had some other form of development and life, but they were included in these nest cells and were part of the path to multicellularity. So when you say that were you born with cancer, I don't think you were born with it. I think you were built with it. And if there is a memory and the cancer cells are within you, maybe like people study markers, if they have stuff which again there is like we're talking about tracking and all, of which families have cancer, like breast cancer, we know will go on. And so I think the billions of years ago, the die was cast when certain streams of cells which became to the MCO had the cancer, not gene, but cancer behavior. Which way you can look at it, it may be genetic, but I think there's a different sense to it, which I agree. I think that's a very important question for us to look at. So thank you, Karen. That's really insightful on your part. Thank you.
Going back to the questions, Harki, both Rajiv and Aman both referred to your cover, and it's a fascinating cover, the cover to the book, and there must be a story behind it. What is its significance?
So I've been to Venice a few times, to Italy a few times, and Venice has always been a very interesting model for a city, though most cities have a similar model. Every big city has a river running through it. Water is so important. And then again, what I just mentioned is the people who were coming together and forming a city around a river, and the river tributaries or channels made were like arteries and veins, were used for circulation. And so it kind of, though was bricks and mortar and water and palpable things like that, it was probably mimicking the way life was originally formed. If you talk about the the geothermal vent theories and how there was temperature, the water, the conditions were right. And so the Venice had the shape of a fish, which is very close to genetics for human beings. It had a canal, central canal, where people came and formed cells around it, which was just like billions of cells getting together around a water source and having a gastrointestinal canal forming with a mouth and a cloaca, which is like the end, the anus. And then there were tributaries which were getting the nutrients down to them. So the whole concept hit me so hard as being an example, and everybody knows Venice, and if you've ever been there and have had a rambaba, you never forget it. But Venice really did capture my imagination as kind of a model or a poster child for the origin of life of cells. So again, it brings back to cell mimicking, humans mimicking life, etc. And there's that connection where we can make out by studying Venice, I think we have an idea of how we actually were formed way back 3.76 billion years ago.
Thank you, Harki. I have a couple of questions more for you, but would we like to take a pause and have you read some more from your book before I proceed?
I can read, but if we don't want to run short of time, if you don't mind, I see some other questions from the audience. Maybe we could tackle that.
Sounds good. Christina?
Sure. There's one more question also from Karen, and she says, Harki, I wasn't aware of your heart attack. When was that, and how are you now?
Thanks, Karen. That was the little tap on the shoulder from nature saying, hey, slow down and think about things. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. As you can see in the pink, I pinked my cheeks to make them pink. Thanks.
So I'm going to move on to my next question, Harki. In your book on page 121, so everybody, you've got to buy Harki's book so that you know what 121 is, and really you need to walk the same journey that Harki did. So do buy his book on Amazon. But on page 121, the chapter heading is the universe, and you include your address. Not that I want you to give out your address, but it emphasizes for me how very tiny we are in this universe of things. So share some of that thought process with us.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So what did I don't need to give out my address totally, but I think what we're talking about is again the concept of size and time. And when we look at the universe and not marvel at it, I think we're missing something. There are two things I could read, but just going back again to my thought process, which had been going on before this book took me over completely. I wrote an invisible hand. It's all mirror work. So anyways, it was about the insignificance. I'd mentioned this poem is titled Insignificance, and I'll just read from there. The depth of the cosmos, the infinity of space, the infinitesimal scale of us related to the universe. Yet we exist, unfazed by the size of our imagination and ego and the depths of our emotion, the power of our love and our hate, the foundations of our existence, unstable in the insecurity of our psyche, held together with the promise of divine love. It goes on a little bit, but again, the thought process was there as to how tiny we are and yet how huge we are because of our imagination and our thought process that can envelop the ideas of this enormity of our existence. Now, about the universe that you mentioned, again, going in the same way of where are we related to where we are? And so I'll just read a little bit from here. Is the universe. We live on planet Earth, which incidentally, and this is mind-boggling again, has an orbital speed of 67,000 miles per hour. Our planes go at 535 with a tailwind knots per hour, and we're traveling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. And to add to it, and rotational speed at the equator of 1,000 miles per hour. So we're going this way and we're spinning and we don't feel it. And that itself is mind-boggling. We need to look at where we are and marvel that we exist. And so we exist as part of the universe. It is worth taking a look at our celestial, I'm trying to be funny here, but celestial environment. Only joke in the book. My address for anyone out there in the universe, like a pen pal, is California, then USA, planet Earth, the solar system, the Milky Way, and then the universe. And there are millions of galaxies that exist. So where we are right now is really quite small. And but again, oh sorry, the second joke, we can add the PO box if you like. But it might take a while for a package to get to me from the outer reaches of the universe, as there are 120 to 300 sextillion, that's 10 to the power of 23 stars in the observable universe, which spans 93 billion light years. And one light year, as you know, is the time light takes to travel in a year, which is trillions of miles. So it's the word astronomical is really that, it's astronomical. I just wanted to write that in because we going from micrometers, a thousandth of a meter, and cells to the universe and what we're doing over here. But that's, like you said, another story.
Harki, I'm so glad that you shared that portion and that poem. I have another one to support that. Again, a perspective of where we are and how tiny we are in this universe. I'd like to read the poem that you have at the back of this book, and it's called, the name of the poem is A Human Life. A brilliant flash of light reflected off a grain of sand, a zillion stars, a trillion miles, a billion years, the universe, a human life, just a brilliant flash reflected off a grain of sand. Moving on to my next question. Harkirat, what's your end message for what we are doing on this planet? I mean, what are your predictions for the future?
Yeah, yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? I don't have predictions for the future in like there's a conclusion or there's an end point, but I think looking at ourselves, at the cell, at the human body, the human being is, I've just taken the human being as an example of multicellularity. There are millions of species, and there's no disrespect to all the other species, but we've just somehow seemed to have climbed to the top. The end message is why and what are we trying to achieve, and achieve in a way that we can exist. You know, the survival instinct is great in a human being, but I think it's just as great in a cell, and it's just as great in the human organism, which is the 7.5 billion souls that we are at the moment. So if you go and look at the human body, we have the brain, we have the lungs, we have tissues and liver and kidneys, etc., that work together in significant harmony. Otherwise, we would be plagued with disease. But most of the time, folks are pretty healthy. And over billions of years, the cells have got together to see and to live and to survive. And that is what I think the human race is trying to do, is to actually get together. And there are two ways of doing it. One is to mimic the human body in a way to say, you know, USA takes the, again, this is just I'm plucking things out. It can take the industrial role. Somebody can take being the fuel energy provider. Somebody can do the waste. Somebody can. So various parts, because we've divided ourselves into countries and continents. So the various parts can link together and say, listen, my specialty is this. It's like me, I am a hand surgeon. But if I have some problem with the toe, I'll send it to the podiatrist or a general surgeon. So if we all have our specialties with some overlap, and we all sign an MOU or a memorandum of understanding that that's how we live, we can actually make this planet very livable, very peaceful. Why I think we have so many different wars and battles going on literally to kill each other is a way of folks trying to say, we know how to do this, let us know how to do this because we can. It's like herding people into a certain way where they can work together to survive as a planet. The other is, of course, ideology or religion, and over centuries we've seen that they a certain way of thinking will be pushed upon everyone else, not because I think they want to kill or incarcerate or whatever. I think they're trying to say ours is a better way. If you follow us, then this will go be sensible in a way that it will survive. So if we look at it, we can, I think, bring, this is like that movie Legally Blonde, world peace by listening to what or seeing what the cells have done over billions of years. And this process, if it's not understood or taken into account, will take us a decade, a century, 2 centuries, millennia. But I think ultimately the aim for the human organism is to go, and guess what? I think it'll end up looking like the billions of years the cells have spent trying to form this beautiful body or the human being. So it's kind of, I call it either global domination due to dictatorship ideology, or it's a kind of a collaboration, a global cooperative collaboration between areas so that everything works as designed by nature all the way through.
Ah,
Your mic again, Mike.
there we go. I'm
I
hoping
think
that
there's
we're going
another-
to move towards the latter, towards collaboration rather than global dominance. Christina, are there any questions?
Yes, let's ask a question about emotion. How do the cells respond to emotions or sensations as they mature from birth onwards and towards the end of the cell's life or death?
Rajiv, you want to take that? I'll come back to Aman from the panelists.
Yeah, sure. Let me read the question here on the chat page again. So how do cells respond to emotions or sensations as they mature from birth onwards and towards the end of cell's life or death? I think, can you hear me now? I just
Yeah.
unmuted myself.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, let's say, the central nervous system or our human emotions, what happens to our brains and what happens to our emotions as we mature? You're not the kind of person that you were 10 years ago. And all this introspection that's happened to you is because you looked at death in the face and realized something broader to look at, not just the daily grind, making the best surgical skills that you had and put that into use. So I think as we all get older, and maybe called wisdom, maybe called whatever, I think our bodies age, our organs age. My shoulder hurt. Thanks for helping out on that one. But at the same time, we cannot forget about the fact that the biggest organ we have, or the biggest enlightenment we have, is our brains and our wisdom and our emotions that can carry us over and above other non-human forms. So yes, I believe that there is a constant evolution going on in our systems that did not exist earlier, and we should be grateful for that.
Aman?
Yeah, I have a more, I guess, that was a great answer and summarize everything, but I could give a more analytical answer to it where, yeah, yes, so cells are actually constantly responding to emotions based on, different sorts of, let's say, parameters that they have, different, in terms of their constituents that are inside the cells. And their interaction with other cells, right? So, and as you age or as circumstances change, the environment surrounding the cells changes, and so does the cell's constituents change inside, right? And that alteration is what defines their response to emotions. So as cells would age, their responses would differ, and that would lead to an alteration in the emotional output. And so that's more of a from analytical viewpoint, but it'd be great to hear Dr. Dhillon's kind of perspective on this from let's say from the book's point of view. So that'd be great too.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for that, guys. Yeah. So the emotions, again, the main thing is, yeah, we have emotions, but the way I've been trying to tie this into the development of emotions is to take it down to the absolute basics. If you have a cell which is wandering around by itself, like we studied the paramecium. And these cells go and hit a toxic source. It will withdraw from there because it finds it toxic and unpleasant. So if you go from just two emotions or qualities of thought is pleasant or unpleasant, or if there's toxicity versus abundance, again, that has been in us for millions and billions of years. We know that if there is something which we feel bad about, we should go away from that. That's an emotion. It can go, if there's some abundance of water and food and it feels pleasant, then you go towards it. That's what we should learn, that if we have a positive emotion, then stay in the environment which gives you positivity and not. That's the basic thing a cell does and would expect a human to do, and it would work for us. Now, as we go, I think how our two panelists have said, as you grow, I think emotions get more influenced by your experiences and by what one learns from not wanting to go into negativity. So negativity, positivity is a very, very basic rule of how we feel. And that's how cells feel. If you dehydrate them, if you heat them, if you give them poisons and noxious substances, they don't like it. So we all have our own positivity, negativity, which is how maybe we should look at it. But age, I think, comes with experience and how to handle it. One of the things actually I would like to say, which this is all kind of in the book, but as a general commanding officer commanding a huge legion of soldiers, it's how you communicate with your soldiers. And there used to be drums, and how each person gives orders down to it. And so if you connect it to the chief of the whole organism, and as Rajiv said, say it's your brain. Uh, I have felt that to communicate with all the cells in the body, if we want to, there is something like what has been accepted by centuries of scholars and religious and enlightened people, is the sound of Om. If that's the kind of vibration you can set with meditation and Om, and maybe even talking to friends where the voice is there, the voice can be used as a tone to tell the body that you're okay, you're in command, and so there are things like that which we can do just to communicate with the cells. If you let them know that you're okay, you will feel better. Again, taking another little example of whether this is right or not, but sometimes when people say, hey, you're talking to yourself, you're going crazy. No, I think they're the most sensible people on earth, because when they vocalize, they are actually trying to send a message that, maybe I'm okay. But those who are kind of insane and they're talking, maybe they're trying desperately to tell their body that they're alive, they exist. So anyway, it's just a way of thinking which I feel is relevant there.
Thank you, Harki. Right now, I would just like to ask if the audience has any questions. Again, we can use the Q&A box and we'll go ahead and read them and get some answers for you. So we have a question right now from Cindy Neisinger about COVID-19. In the COVID-19 era, I think I have learned more than I want to know about ventilators and the ICU. Your poem on page 182, titled ICU, is so relevant to this time. A poet and a surgeon, inspired. What came first in your life, poet or surgeon?
Oh, thanks, Cindy. It's always nice to see you on Facebook. Again, going back to Inlandia, I had actually written my memoir, and which is, of course, nothing to do with poetry. And I went to the first, I think, Katie workshop with Ruth, and way back. And when I went there, I thought I'd learned something about writing, finishing a book. And when they gave prompts instead of prose, I started kind of writing in the poetry format. And so poems kind of were brought out in a strange fashion for me. I never thought I could even write a single line of poetry, but that somehow triggered the dam and everything came out and so resulted in 2 books. But I'd been doing surgery before for 30 years. So I'm happy to say that I like the surgery first because I don't think poetry would have fed the family somehow.
Okay, great.
So in a way, I'm answering some of Cindy's son's observations, and that is that he didn't know it, but there still was a poet living deep down inside. And to convince you of that, I'm going to read just a little bit of this book, and you tell me if you discern the poet in his prose. I have cut open patients and seen beautiful normal tissue and ugly abnormal diseased tissue. What I think of as nature's beauty gone wrong. I have put my patients back together, cured them, and relieved them of their pain. I have seen cells in section in their stained beauty and unstained nakedness. That's page 13. And this is a one sentence from page 15. So, I have looked at the beauty of life, the ugliness of disease, and the stillness of death, and from the preserved cadaver, revealing its details, to the warm corpse hiding its mystery. That's part of his poems coming through the prose. If there are any other questions, now's the time, or I will move on.
I don't see any questions, but there is a lot of support and people that are appreciating Harki, your book, and this program. So we have a comment from Vanit Sandhu. Thank you, Dr. Dhillon, for being an inspiration to us all. And Jean Wagner, she just says thank you, and she appreciates Harki and all the friends and Inlandia for doing this event. So one more comment from Karen Bradford. Of course, there is a poet inside a scientist. The Nobel Prize winning scientist Konrad Lorenz said that scientists ultimately fall in love with that which they study.
Indeed. So, Harki, are you going to say something, or may I move on?
No, I just want to, again, just like Christina says, you know, it's all the folks you meet and the folks who come here and have supported this event and listen to me talk, which can be painful sometimes. But it's really sweet of everyone to come down, and I appreciate it so much. It's not just a village that makes authors. I think it's an institute like Inlandia which helps. So Katie, Christina, Dinaz, all the members, all my friends, all those who have joined anyways, because they thought this might be interesting, I thank you. And it's on Amazon.com. If you guys buy the book or books, I think it would be lovely to get a review or whatever you think. It would be nice. And that can get other people to go ahead and continue our thought process into the future, and of course, obviously the present. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Harki. Many of us will reread your book. Some of us will buy it and read it. And this interview and this occasion, I'm sure, will be saved. Katie and Christina will do that so that we can go back and enjoy your comments and find more depth in the book than ever before. Very few people think about who we are, how we came to be, and where we are going. Cellular Theory is a compelling, visionary book that encompasses a vast and intriguing realm of speculation and ideas, a book to savor and a book to mull over. Thank you, Harkirat, for this very precious afternoon. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Inlandia Institute.
And to our wonderful panelists who read this book so many times that they know it better than I do.
Thanks for having us here.
You muted, Christina.
So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you Harki, Dinaz, Aman, and Rajiv for your perspectives and applying your expertise in this literary context. Thank you to our audience for coming, for watching, for your support and your questions. I hope you enjoyed this talk, and also be sure to check out Harki's books on Amazon.com. His other 2 books of poetry, Invisible Hands and Misty Darkness, are available on Amazon. So yes, this video will be, or is recorded and will be available to be viewed on the Inlandia YouTube page. So you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to find out about more events like this and to get involved in writing workshops. So thank you everyone for joining and have a great day. Stay safe and take care. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.